Does newer really mean better? Today we're going to drive the Infiniti Q50 and see what it's like behind the wheel. Then we're going to drive this much older Infiniti G35 and see which one is really more fun. Now without wasting any more of your time, this is Performance on Wheels and let's go get after it. If you're new to Performance on Wheels, my name is Austin, this is my dad Todd. Now let's set off behind the wheel of this 2007 Infiniti G35 that has a 306 horsepower, 3.5 liter naturally aspirated V6 that is paired to a 5-speed automatic transmission. Behind the wheel of this G35, let's point out some obvious things. We still have hydraulic steering feel, so we don't have all the selectable drive modes that we're gonna find over on the Q50, but we do have a very heavy weighted steering wheel feel. This is still rack and pinion days, right? So a power assisted vehicle speed sensitive rack and pinion steering system is what is in the G35, and you can feel it, it feels good. But as we talk about the Q50 here in a minute, we're gonna have some obvious opinions about this. So it feels a little clumsy. Now granted, we don't have the same low profile tires on the G35 that the Q50 has. And obviously we're a car that is 7 years older, so there's some additional wear and tear in that regard. So take some of that with a grain of salt. But as far as like the power, it feels really good. There's a lot of power, it accelerates really well. It's got a good engine note. The slight exhaust leak adds a little something there too, I think.
It really does. Now, I really enjoy driving behind the wheel of the G35. The first thing that I noticed while driving behind the wheel of this thing is how I'm sitting now a bit deeper inside of the car. I have the availability to nicely power adjust that column and the power adjustable telescoping steering wheel to really get myself comfortable and feel like I'm in a nice sporty driving position behind the wheel of this thing. Now, when I do grab that steering wheel and start hitting the road, I do notice how heavy the steering is in this vehicle. It does feel nice, there's a lot of response to it, but I don't know, it might almost be too heavy for my liking for daily driving standpoint, but when it comes to enthusiast driving, it does feel quite nice. I do really like how when you shift that 5-speed automatic into sport mode, it automatically downshifts for you and it's always ready to go. It actually feels like a pretty sporty 5-speed transmission. Granted, you can also get the G35 here in a 6-speed manual.
So going into this video, I was already starting to think about my preconceived notions, my preconceived comments that I was gonna have on the Q50 compared to the G35. And a lot of that was just based on the fact of the steering feel of the Q50, the drive-by-wire or the steering change that took place in Infiniti's technology going from the G35 to the Q50. So in my head, I'm already thinking that the G35 is going to have that more raw feel than the Q50. But what I found, and granted, you're putting the whole package together here, like you throw it in sport mode in the Q50 and you get that weight back. Now, you don't necessarily feel everything the same way that you feel in the G35, but what you do have is a lot more confidence behind the wheel of the Q50.
It's very interesting to me. I don't fully understand how the drive-by-wire system works in the Q50, but based on what I've read online and after driving this for quite a while, I honestly feel like there's a lot more feedback that comes through that steering wheel than I ever would have guessed. For example, this vehicle has needed brakes in the time that I've owned it, and I accidentally ran into a curb when it was pretty icy, and I bent a wheel. And I have all of the main normal feedback coming through those wheels, through the steering wheel, as you would typically have on your standard vehicle. It's not like I feel disconnected from what is happening in the wheels in front of me. I can feel what is going on in the front end of this car quite well. Granted, I can't feel every crack in the road. I can't feel every bump, but it is very direct. It's quite heavy. But the big kicker, the big difference here is when we start to, like, for example, slide on some snow. In the G35, when you crank that wheel and you slide forward and have some understeer, for example, you can definitely have feedback of what's going on and you can feel that you're sliding forward inside of the G35. Now, if you were just holding the wheel, I could tell you that. If you were just holding the wheel in this car and had no visual, I could probably not tell you that here in the Q50. And that's kind of how I can best explain the steering feel difference between these two cars?
We got a couple more gears on the Q50 compared to the G35.
We do.
That in itself makes a difference. And you have to say, back in 2007, big wheels weren't necessarily a thing from the manufacturer. So the 17-inch wheels with the 55 series tires versus the 40 series tires on 19s that are on the Q50, that in itself creates a tremendous difference out of the box from the OEM.
It absolutely
in
does.
Steering itself and just the overall platform feel.
Now, granted, this does have a few more gears. I know this isn't a reliability video, but when it comes to the transmission, the Infiniti Q50 is lacking when we compare it to the G35 over there due to a sensor that commonly fails inside of this thing. So that is just one more thing that you should take into account. Even though this technically has better gas mileage and it does have a couple more gears, which make it get out of the hole a little bit quicker and have a little bit higher top speed, is it really all that worth it when you have to spend potentially $2,500 for a part to replace this thing? That's kind of your call.
Austin, I'm glad you brought up the acceleration and kind of that piece of it, because at the end of the day, we're talking about cars that are 7 years apart. You would think there'd be this tremendous performance difference. Now we're transitioning on to the powertrain versus the steering feel like we've been talking about. So you'd think there'd be this dramatic change in the power delivery, the power feel. And at the end of the day, like you said at the beginning of the video, 306 to 333 horsepower, 0 to 60 time. We have low 5 second versus mid 5 second.
Yep.
And quarter mile time, we have 13.5 over on the Q50 versus around 14, just ballpark numbers here, right? There's obviously a difference. The Q50 is a little bit faster, but when you're behind the wheel, a daily driving standpoint, just out having a good time or maybe passing something, you really can't tell the difference. They both do have a nice V6 engine rumble to them. In this Q50, again, just for a reminder, this is before we threw turbos on there, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is the naturally aspirated 3.7 liter, which is the more reliable motor when it comes to a high mileage example. So that's why I went with the 3.7 variant versus the 3.0 twin turbo. I love both of these cars. Now, we need to answer a question. We made a previous video talking about, is more money mean more better when comparing the G35 to the Q50 here. I think we both agreed that the Q50 was definitely a better value per dollar when you're talking about an overall package on the current used car market. Now we need to talk about that on the performance side of things and a fun to drive standpoint. Now this vehicle you picked up for about $1,500. However, on the used car market, it's anywhere from 5 to 6, we'll say.
Yep.
And this vehicle on the used car market is anywhere from, let's say, 13 to 50. You can buy them brand new. So what vehicle is a better value per dollar? We're just going to say that we're looking at the 3.7 Q50. So let's say around 15 grand. 15 grand to 5 grand.
Yeah.
$10,000 price difference in performance.
Yep. And on that note, the Q50 that we have today is definitely more fun to drive around corners.
Yeah.
But if you're not pushing the car hard and you're just on a daily driving standpoint, you're gonna have a really hard time telling the difference. Obviously, you got better tech.
I would say that the steering, in my opinion, is much more enjoyable in the Q50. It's heavy here in the G35. The Q50 is so precise all the time. However, my fiance, who actually daily drives this car, she does not like the steering in it because of how responsive and touchy it is. Because even in the non-sport mode settings, just the lightest movement of the wheel, it turns the front end of this thing, which does make it feel like it has great feedback. But if you're not interested in this vehicle for a performance reason, it might be a little bit too touchy for your liking.
It would be interesting to know if we took the wheels off of the Q50 and threw them over on the G35, which, side note, you brought up hitting a curb. We did learn that you can take a wheel bearing out of a G35 and throw it on a Q50.
Yeah,
so,
a lot of interchangeable parts between these two vehicles. It's definitely quite interesting.
Yeah, so I'd love to know just that tire difference, because we were noticing some squealing out of the old Continentals on the G35 where the Q50 seemed rock solid. Yeah. Obviously we have a little suspension that's a lot more tired.
Well, and the G35 here felt like it had a little bit more body roll. I don't know if that's comparable to the suspension or not, being worn out.
If it's the tires or if it's the suspension, hard to tell for sure.
I'm not sure, but the Q50 definitely felt significantly more planted, as well as a more confidence-inspiring and better feeling feedback steering wheel. So In my opinion, if you're looking for a vehicle that is going to be like an autocross car or a fun to drive car on a day-to-day basis, I think the Q50 might be worth the additional change here.
Yeah.
Because like, yes, you could put the extra 10 grand into the G35. It would be better with that additional amount of money, but is it worth it? No.
Right.
In my opinion, it's not. I think that if you're looking for something that's really, really fun to drive, this is a great car.
It is.
It truly is a great
Yeah.
car. I'm not dismissing that, but the Q50 is just, they did bring it up another level when it came to the fun to the drive aspect. And we should also mention, we were looking at 2 all-wheel drive models, and both of these vehicles are available in rear-wheel drive as well. And both of these vehicles, even being all-wheel drive, are extremely rear drive bias.
Thank you for joining us today on the video comparing the new versus old Infiniti and which one is truly better. We appreciate your support by hitting that like and subscribe button. We'll see you in the next video.